So we have heard from our earlier speakers also as we move into this session. This is herein we are going to be having a talk on infrastructure imperatives for implementation. We did hear in the earlier sessions from the speakers, in fact a lot from the audience also, talking about certain issues and impediments which are blocking this huge infrastructure which we are planning. How we are going to be going about, how we are going to be addressing these issues and challenges. We are going to be looking forward to it in the panel and in the live session, but right now we look what are the imperatives for the implementation. For the policies, of course, are being made. What we lack is the execution. What we lack is the implementation. So we look into that, and really glad that we have Mr. Y.M. Deosthalee, the chairman of L&T Finance Holdings, present with us. We look forward to your views and your thoughts on how to control this bottlenecks which are there, especially towards the execution and implementation. And coming from finance, yes, that's a huge, when we are talking about building these smart cities or building about this huge infrastructure, finance is one another imperative which is required. So please join me, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of energy, I'm sure, after the food, once it goes in, it gives in a lot of energy, so let that energy be there to welcome him. And I hand over to Mr. Deosthalee.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank ETH and the organizers for inviting me to speak on a subject on which we can write books and books. So, a lot has been discussed, talked, debated, deliberated for years, but still we have some problems. In the given time, I would like to focus more on the issues rather than what exactly is happening in the country. All of us are aware that India is a young country with 54% of the population under 25. Substantial portion of the people live in villages still, and over the years the urbanization process has started, but a lot more is going to happen in the subsequent decades. And therefore, as the population migrates, manufacturing sector needs to contribute much more than what it is doing today. And for the manufacturing sector to contribute, it is extremely important that the focus on infrastructure not only continues, but it is significantly enhanced. Low quality infrastructure has really eroded the competitiveness to a considerable extent of Indian manufacturing companies. Most of you would have traveled to China and other Asian countries as well, and you would have seen what kind of investments have taken place in infrastructure in those countries, and how the manufacturing sector in China has benefited arising out of these substantial investments made by the government over there. I'm not suggesting that we haven't done anything, but our problems are far too many, and therefore added vigor is required as far as this sector is concerned. If you look at our cities, there is huge problem. Any city, if you go to India today, any large city, you will find huge traffic jams. And if you come to a city like Mumbai, it will be difficult in the current circumstances or current situation to find roads, because there are more potholes than roads in Mumbai, and that is a real situation. It has rained heavily. So all these cities, Mumbai metropolitan region has seen its population growing from 1.45 crores to almost 2 crores. Its suburban railway system, I think this statistics is extremely important. Considered the lifeline of the city, is supposed to carry over 4,500 passengers in a 9-car train against a rated capacity of 1,700 passengers. Mumbai's road network has been stuck at around 2,000 kilometers for the past few years, while the city has seen 56% jump in private cars, which now occupy 85% of the total available road space in the city. If you go to Bangalore, Bangalore's population also has doubled. In the last decade, the city's road network of 1,300 kilometers hasn't grown, but it is now home to more than 52 lakhs private vehicles. Average vehicle speed has slowed to 10 kilometers per hour. And this is not peculiar to Bangalore or Mumbai. It is extremely unpredictable today for us to reach to any place. From my office, which is in place called Santa Cruz in Mumbai, airport is just about 10 minutes away. But sometimes it takes more than 1 hour. And I have seen, once I was traveling to Delhi in the night, it took me 1 hour and 45 minutes. And I just reached the airport 10 minutes before the departure. Unfortunately, or somehow, the flight was slightly delayed, and therefore I could catch it. This is the situation everywhere in the country. I was in Pune the other day, just last week, and I reached Pune from Mumbai in 2.5 hours. But within the city of Pune, it took 1 hour for me to reach the destination. So this is the state of affairs as far as the cities are concerned. And therefore, what is important is, apart from these large cities, we need to have many, many more cities. And therefore, this smart cities concept of the government of India, this Make in India manufacturing emphasis, all this is extremely, extremely important. But what is important is implementation of the programs which have been announced. The government is cognizant of essential elements required for meeting our ambitious economic development agenda. This is amply clear from the substantial increase in budgetary allocation for infrastructure development in successive budgets. In fact, the realization of the importance of infrastructure development was first demonstrated by the first NDA government around the turn of the century. India undertook a massive infrastructure development program, starting with 5,834 kilometers Golden Quadrilateral project, launched in the year 2001. This and other infrastructure development programs were carried forward by the successive governments. Every year, scores of projects in various sectors were awarded, whether in EPC or some variation of the PPP model. However, within 10 years, the country was saddled with an unprecedented number of stalled infrastructure projects. So it's not that the efforts were lacking. Since the liberalization process started, government has been giving tremendous importance to infrastructure. But then what we found when this new government was formed was substantial number of large infrastructure projects stuck because of various reasons. And there seems to be a fair amount of consensus amongst experts and policymakers on the question of what needs to be done. However, there seems to be somewhat of a confusion on the subject of how these programs could be implemented. And I wish to spend a few minutes on that part. In my opinion, the root cause of most implementation bottlenecks that have hindered progress on infrastructure development initiative has been lack of cooperation, coordination, or togetherness between all agencies involved. And I will spend a little time on this, giving some examples. There are projects which are awarded by central government, and there are projects which are awarded by state government. If a project is awarded by central government, let's assume through PPP mode, cooperation of many central government departments approvals from many central government departments, approval from state government, approval from local agencies, all these are important. But there is no coordinated approach in doing so. Let me give you an example. L&T has a subsidiary which does project development work. They have participated in the through the private sector route. They have participated in developing infrastructure. So they have developed several roads, they have done some ports, and they have also taken a very ambitious metro rail projects in the city of Hyderabad. Now if you look at the experience of these entities, in every project there is some or the other problem. In one of the road projects, we suffered very, very badly because of the non-cooperation of the local political system in the state. So they wanted lots of concessions to be given, passes to be issued, and this is not part of the original concession agreement. So you have a model on the basis of which you bid for a project. As you start implementing, lots of problems come up. So they are saying that you can't charge toll to these people, or you have to make sure that they are given 25%, 30% concession. These are all ad hoc demands which are made by the local system. In another project, there was a configuration of a project in a particular manner. As we started implementing it, it substantially changed, which impacts the revenue model of that particular project. In the sense, we have made some assumptions of revenues, cost. As you go along, if you start changing that, and this is a project developed by the state government, and also at the same time, you need approvals. This is a project which is being implemented in a city, and it's a very large project. While implementing the project, there are railway bridges to be constructed, there are underpasses to be constructed, and there you need approvals from the central government railway ministry. Similarly, you need lots and lots of land acquisition, land to be acquired. Within a city, land to be acquired, within a city, right of way to be acquired. Now, unless there is a coordinated approach by all concerned, and this is done before a project is awarded, it is extremely difficult to implement the project and earn the desired revenues which are contemplated at the time of bidding. So the point which I am making is that when we are talking of infrastructure projects of any kind, be it road, be it port, be it railway, metro rail or any kind, I think this preparatory work by all agencies in a coordinated manner is a must. And all agencies need to sit together at the beginning. How many approvals are required? What is the time frame within the approval is required to be required? If you want smooth implementation, if you want the people who are investing in the project not to suffer, then a coordinated approach by all is absolutely essential. And I think this is one very important point on which there is a very little debate according to me. What is being discussed, people say about land acquisition, environment clearance, all those are important points. But what is essential is that if we want to implement an infrastructure project which involves multiple agencies, then these multiple agencies must collaborate before the project is before we start implementation of this project. There are lots of local agencies, there are municipalities. So, and India is a democratic country. So we have different sets of governments, there are religious issues, there are communal issues, so it's not very easy to implement an infrastructure project in a country like India. So this point of sitting together, making sure that all these implementation hurdles are addressed before the project is awarded is very, very critical for smooth implementation of infrastructure project. That is number one. The second point is that while dealing with governments, we have experienced that getting payment for the work done is an issue. You have a very well laid out mechanism, but for some reason or the other, contractors invariably suffer for getting money. Even if it is an EPC contract, for getting normal dues, it's a problem. And today, many of the construction companies in India are in difficulty. Quite a few of them are non-performing assets in the books of banks. Lenders if you go to banks today, they will name top lenders are all construction, top NPAs in infrastructure sector are all construction companies. Why is it so? One of the main reasons for that, and I think this is being addressed now to some extent, because the government has realized that thousands of crores are stuck with various government agencies. Now there could be, in some cases, there could be genuine reasons, but in many cases it is just a procedural delay. And for years, if the contractors do not get paid, how are they going to continue business? And it is a fact that thousands of crores were stuck. It's a different matter now that an agency like NHAI has now said that they will release almost about 6,000-7,000 crore. Now, we also had this problem of every project going for arbitration. If there is a dispute, let it report to arbitration. Arbitration will take its own course, and then in the meantime, the patient is dead. This is not going to. Now, two things are happening. One is NHAI has agreed to release payments. Secondly, this Arbitration Act getting amended. Hopefully, that also will resolve some of the issues which I am talking about. But what I am saying is, it's not that these projects are awarded with healthy, very huge margins. They are wafer-thin margins, and in the process, if the payment gets delayed, these contractors cannot survive. In the last few years, that is one of the main reasons why construction companies or infrastructure projects have got stuck and delayed. These companies don't have money to continue in the projects. I mentioned earlier about clearances. A lot of work has been done since this government has been formed. Environment clearance have been much faster than what it was. But I think before that, both all these issues of land acquisition, environment clearance, and last but not the least, getting approvals from various government departments like railways was a big issue. Till today also, if you are implementing a project which involves other ministries, those ministerial approvals used to take a long time. In power, one of the main issues was reforms in the generation sector and no reforms in the distribution sector. I think what we strongly need is revamping the distribution of power sector. Uday scheme is an extremely good scheme that attempts to make discoms healthy. But the fact remains that the power projects which have been put up in the last few years, getting payments from distribution companies, discoms, is a big problem. The government of India is giving, rightly so, a lot of importance to renewable energy. And many states are implementing renewable energy projects. There is a mandate to have renewable portion in the overall power generated. However, in many states, in the recent past, these developers are not getting paid. And this is a major issue. There is a valid power purchase agreement. If the government does not honor its own contracts, who is going to invest in the country? This is an extremely serious issue. I have had discussions with some of the state governments, and they very categorically tell me that, please tell me, how do we allocate resources? I have to pay for coal. If I don't pay for coal, my thermal power projects will not work. So should I pay for coal or should I buy power and pay to these renewable energy developers? I think this is not the question to be asked to someone who has a valid contract with you. So the point which I am making is, in the power sector, and for that matter in any sector, honoring of contracts is extremely critical for ensuring that the confidence is there for people to put money in the infrastructure sector. And I am talking mainly from the point of view of private sector participation in infrastructure projects. Government wants substantial number of projects to be developed in the private sector. A lot of help is being given today, but the fact remains that our discoms today are not healthy. Many of them still have a lot of problems, and because of which the lending community is also suffering. If you look at the NPAs, non-performing assets of large banks, public sector banks, and we've talked a lot about that, if you are talking of 6 lakh crores of NPAs, etc., a substantial part of that is coming from infrastructure sector, and that is because of stuck projects, and that is also because of the construction companies. I talked about the poor health of construction companies. They not getting paid, and in turn the lending community is suffering. Similarly, DISCOMs, payments or dues from DISCOMs is a big problem. Now with this Uday scheme, at least it appears to me that the problem is more or less getting resolved. However, lot depends on the implementation of that Uday scheme. Uday scheme's demands discipline, increase in tariffs on a sustainable, continuous basis. So that requires some kind of a political courage to constantly revising tariffs. Uday schemes demand elimination or reducing losses, distribution and transmission losses, free power. So I think it's a complicated subject, but the point is that when we are talking of private sector participation in infrastructure projects, these complicated problems have to be addressed head on. We can't wish away from the fact that distribution of power needs reform, and these distribution companies need to be stronger. There need to be some bolder decisions to be taken. If we are saying that there is a problem, there are lots of power plants in the country which are operating at a very inefficient level. There are old power plants which are set up, very low PLF, but they are in government sector. Why do we need to continue with some of them? We need to close many of these power projects. To that extent, the distribution companies probably will benefit. So what I am trying to say is that substantial of the private power has come to the market. There are some projects in power sector which are stuck. If they come to the market in the next 1 or 2 years, they will add capacity. So it's very important that somebody buys this power. Today what we are saying is we have surplus power in the country. That's what I've heard. Government saying that we don't need power for next 2 years. This is very surprising that if you really look at the situation at many places, there is load shedding and power is not available. The real problem seems to be the inability on the part of DISCOMs to buy the power and pay for it. That I think is the real situation. So for that, the increase in tariffs on a regular basis by these DISCOMs and also all these other problems which I mentioned need to be addressed. Otherwise, this scheme of Uday, which is so nicely prepared and drafted, can also lead to lots of difficulty. There are other steps which the government has taken recently. Many of them are good. I talked about NHAI releasing payments. We have also, this power and merging of power and coal ministry. Railway ministry also has announced that they will give faster clearances. We have seen under a dynamic environment minister, environment clearances have become much faster and quicker than what they were in the past. This Bankruptcy and Arbitration Act, the new act, also is expected to resolve problems relating to disputes. So these steps are extremely good steps, but are they sufficient? Is it going to solve all the problems in the infrastructure sector? When the government is saying that we are going to spend 2,24,000 crore allocation in the last budget, and NHAI saying that 4,368 kilometers of highways with an estimated cost of 60,000 crore to be awarded in FY16. All these are extremely good, ambitious, needed plans and announcements. But the steps which have been taken, are they sufficient steps for making sure that the implementation of this project is smooth? My answer is unfortunately no. And the reason for that is that there are 3 issues which need to be addressed for these plans to be implemented in a smooth manner. I talked about the health of the banking system or the lending community. Today, one of the problems which is faced by many developers is inability on the part of the public sector banking system to take decisions. They are shying away from taking decisions. They are not in a mood to sanction new good projects. I'm not saying that nothing is getting sanctioned, but it is taking enormous time because all their past decisions are being questioned. There are NPAs, there is no doubt. The NPAs are not necessarily, in my humble opinion, because of bad decisions. NPAs are because of various points which we talked about. It is because the DISCOMs have not been reformed. It is also because there were delays in getting payments from government agencies. It is also because disputes went on and on and on. The arbitration decisions took long time. Everything went to the court. So there are many things which resulted in these problems in the infrastructure sector. When the projects were awarded, it was not necessary that those projects were awarded on wrong, without any consideration or without any thinking. It's possible that some of the decisions were probably wrong. Some of the projects where money was sanctioned, maybe the banking system went a little overboard, but according to me, in any business it happens. The mistakes happen, but things must go on. Today the problem is the system is not very willing to take decisions. I think this must change. So what I am trying to say is, if we want implementation of this particular infrastructure plan, then the lending community must start acting. And for that, it is essential that the government needs to give them courage that you must take decisions. You decide quickly, there is no problem. They should find a solution within the current system, or they should find a system by which the lending community is comfortable in taking decisions, like 2-3 banks sitting together, or a panel taking decisions, or any other thing. There are various ways in which this problem can be addressed. But unless this problem is addressed, it is very difficult for us to imagine that private sector participating in a major way in development of infrastructure. So this is point number one. The second point is, which I mentioned earlier, it is very important that all the constituents sit together. All of them first list down what are the issues on an infrastructure project. Awarding infrastructure projects is only one part of the story, and particularly a project which is a complicated project. For example, if you are talking of a port requires land acquisition. Port is in a state, and that land has to be acquired in that state, and which is what we did in Orissa. We implemented one project. I must tell you, this was a success story. That state government was extremely cooperative, and we could finish that land acquisition in a very short period of time. So land, then from port you need to evacuate, so need a railway system there. So therefore you have to work along with the railway ministry, and line has to be built, whether it is a private sector line, railways are going to operate. It takes enormous amount of time in taking such decisions. So this is another entity which comes into being over there. The third is, there are other departments like customs, which have nothing to do with the infrastructure projects, but there are regulatory issues. So my point is that whenever we are talking of a large, complicated infrastructure projects, awarding authority needs to decide which are the entities involved and have a dialogue and discussion upfront for sorting out the issues which are in this. If that happens, implementation will become smoother. I talked about the metro rail projects. In these metro rail projects, if government changes, and with the change in the government, there is a configuration also changes, it's very difficult for the developer to then, it is almost a lost case for the developer, that after the project is awarded, things are changing. That can't happen. I think nobody should have this. What I'm trying to say is, if the project is for 10 years, successive governments, if there is a change, need to own whatever has been awarded. The same subsequent government, whichever party is in power, they must honor that. Unless that is, and I think that is a problem in our country, because we are a democracy, and in democracy, lots of political parties. It actually happened that in a state there is a change in the government. That should not really impact the developer. Unless that kind of a confidence is there, it will be tough for private sector to participate. I think what I am trying to say is that announcements are good, but actions are required for enabling private sector participation in a big way. So this is the second important point I wanted to mention. The third important point is that when a contract is entered into, resolution of that contract or resolution of dispute needs to be much faster than what is happening in our country. So I discussed about arbitration, I discussed about bankruptcy, we talked about going to every project going to the court. All that must stop. If there is an award given by an entity for dispute, that award must be honored. If you want to go to the court, you can go to the court later on. Because if every contract is going to get challenged, it will be very difficult for that entity to survive. Because the decision may come after 2 years, 1 year, 3 years. That's not going to help. And this is what exactly has happened in our country. So this is very important. Timely resolution of disputes is a must for any infrastructure project, be it a PPP project or be it a contracting project. In both, timely resolution of disputes is very, very critical for development of infrastructure. So to summarize, India is at a point in her growth journey where actions will take today, whatever action we take today will determine whether we are able to achieve our goal of becoming a high-income economy. All great economic transformations, whether the USA in the early 20th century with its railroad program, Japan in the mid-20th century with its high-speed rail program, and China in the 21st century with all aspects of infrastructure have built on the bedrock of infrastructure development. And India too needs to put its best foot forward as far as infrastructure is concerned. And to ensure optimal implementation, greater government coordination, mutual trust between government and private sector is an absolute necessity. As a country, we need to go beyond ad hoc measures and develop institutional mechanisms that promote and maintain this trust and coordination, whether one government is in power or the other one is in power. So I hope that subsequent discussions which are going to take place, there will be healthy debate on some of these issues. The hope is that there is a lot of trust on infrastructure, state governments as well as central government. There is a desire, and I think that hope and desire will probably make both state and central governments to act on the issues which I mentioned. Thank you very much once again for calling me.
Thank you, Mr. Deosthalee, and I think all of us agree with the issues which he highlighted. There is, of course, a lot of cooperative federalism is required in this country. There is a lot of government and the private sector cooperations is required. And as you rightly mentioned, even if there is the change of the government's honoring of the contract and what has been awarded, that needs to be done. Any questions if you have to him? Probably we can take 1 or 2 questions. I think we all agree and we are aware of these issues with this, looking for some solutions. So may I request you, sir, to kindly step up here once again on the stage, and would like to invite Archana to please present a token of our appreciation to him. In fact, his talk sets the floor for the discussions which we are going to be having.